So you've grown your firm really nicely. 5 attorneys from just you. From the outside, it looks great. It's incredible. But anybody who's gone through it knows it's not a straight line up. You got ups and downs and steps forward and steps back. And I know that, so you had your first baby during COVID, and then maybe an attorney quit at the same time. Maybe talk me through some of the ups and downs and, what sorts of lessons you've learned and maybe advice you could give to others out there as they're trying to build their firms.
1000%. You hit the nail on the head. It is not a straight line up. I've never met a business owner who will say that no matter what their growth is. Ups and downs abound. And one thing I've learned is, and especially because I have a couple of my really close friends who started their business a couple of years after I started mine. So being a little bit ahead, I can tell them what's to come, just like my friends would tell me, what to expect. I would say it never ends, right? It never ends. Just as soon as you think you've put out that one horrible fire, another one is about to grab your attention and get you out of the room running. But you know what? The alternative is something that I know a lot of business owners with failed businesses, especially law firms, who have had to go back. They try to open up shop and they couldn't get clients, or the finances didn't work out, and I've interviewed them. They were looking for a role, and I just don't have it in me to ever do that again. And so I always remind myself and people who are starting on this journey that it just will not end. So just be okay with that. You're better for it.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview founders of law firms. And today I have Laura Ramos James with me. I'm really excited to talk to her. She is a personal injury lawyer and owns a firm, started a firm down in Austin, Texas. Laura, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to get into your background and what you've built down there and what you're building down there, but why don't you sort of give us a picture of your firm now? So, where are you? How many people you've got? That sort of thing.
Yes. So we are a personal injury law firm. We're litigation led. We're based out of Austin, but take cases all over Texas. We are a couple people over 20. It's 5 lawyers. Let me think what else I can tell you about it. We have our main office is in Austin, but we do have a couple of offices in South Texas. And I think that's about it.
That's awesome. So let's go back. So after law school, you started out in insurance defense. Is that right? Did I get that right?
That's right. I did it for 3 years.
So how was that for you? I started out in med-mal defense. So I sort of started out too. And I thought for me, it was a really good experience. But how about for you?
Incredible experience. I actually just wanted trial and litigation experience, and I was going to be out of there. But I landed in this very, very good boutique firm with a good team. I learned a whole bunch. But then ultimately, you're working for insurance companies. So you learn a lot of strategy, a lot of dirty tactics that they use. And then you bring them to this side and put them to the service of our clients.
And so you are on the PI side now, but did you go in-house? Did I see that you sort of went in-house or did something in between?
So I wanted to move to Austin, and the position that was available to me was to start a personal injury law firm from scratch for someone else, and to also have an in-house counsel role at a funding company. So it was kind of like my time was split half and half as the law firm was ramping up. So that was my first role.
So that's interesting. So I had a similar experience. So my last firm, I left to go in-house part-time for a client, and then I also spun out my own law firm part-time. So I sort of did the same thing, and then the firm kept growing, and so then I moved to the firm full-time. So that's interesting. So So let's talk about moving to the plaintiff side. So what did you always know you wanted to be a trial lawyer? Did you always know you wanted to be a plaintiff side trial lawyer?
That's a great question because I didn't know in so many words, but my journey as a trial lawyer, really, I think about it as starting when I was 3. I was a victim of a dog bite attack, and it was, a catastrophic facial injury to, I'd say probably one that forges the path that you end up, having in your life. And I had multiple surgeries, medical procedures, things like that. But the way the attack happened was it was a dog that belonged to some family friends, and they didn't warn us the dog was there, didn't restrain it, didn't tell us it was pretty vicious. So during the aftermath, there were some implications that my parents had some fault because, of course, they're the parents, so they should be watching their kids. It was kind of what was being circulated, and that kind of, I'd say that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, in that I was very young, I was very little, but you know what's right and wrong and what's the truth. And so I wanted to two things. One is I started developing a desire for, righting wrongs and getting justice, and also for people who I felt were in the same position as myself. Years and years later, I end up really understanding a little bit more about like what it would mean, like what career or what professional path would help me get there, or get that kind of sense of getting justice fulfilled. And it was, to me, it looked like being a lawyer, being in a courtroom, all that good stuff. So when I started doing that, when I started actually litigating cases and getting out there, that's when it all started to become clearer that, yeah, okay, this is actually what I always wanted to do. But in reality, it wasn't until I have had sort of this realization of I am on the wrong side. I want to be a trial lawyer. I want to get justice, but this is not the justice I want to be getting, for people who actually caused, losses and damages and whatnot. So when I became a plaintiff's lawyer, then that's exactly when it all came full circle for me.
And so you said you started sort of an office for somebody else. Is that what happened? And then eventually did you break off of there to start your own? Tell me what the process there was.
I started with another plaintiff's firm that we sort of grew from the ground up. And a couple of years into that, I wasn't feeling like we had the same vision as far as, what cases to work on, how to prosecute them, what kind of service to give. So once there wasn't that alignment, I went to work for someone else. And it was sort of the same thing, trial lawyers and business people that I admire and respect a bunch, but when you don't align at some point, my thinking was, there are a lot of people, a lot of trial lawyers that I like and respect, but am I going to be jumping from firm to firm and come to find that at the end of the day, I want to do things a certain way, or should I just do things the way I want to do them from the start? So that's kind of how that went.
I represent a lot of lawyers coming together, forming partnerships, and also breaking apart. And vision, huge. I mean, I think anytime anybody's starting a firm, you got to have a vision of what you want it to be. But especially if you have partners, and if you're not on the same page, it may work for a little while, but it's not going to work a long time. So I think probably it was inevitable that you had to move on. So you decided, hey, I'm going to start my firm. So is that 2018?
That's 2018.
So here's a question that I always ask. There are people who say, yeah, maybe someday I'll do it, or whatever, and then they never do. And then others, they always know they're going to do it. Was that something you always knew? And then what was the trigger that really said, all right, I'm doing it now?
Yeah, I always have had an entrepreneurial spirit. That's like, there's no denying that. And looking back, at my childhood and just different things that I always, I'm driving around and I'm thinking like, what's a better name for this business? Like, how could you increase profit for this other business? Like, that's always been in me, but I've never actually, I never actually thought this is the route I want to go. I want to create an actual business, and it's going to be a law firm. Like I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and the business side of it never came to mind. Having conversations with my husband about, now that I'm a plaintiff's lawyer and I am a trial lawyer and I do all this litigation, and I'm still not fulfilled. Like something is missing, something's wrong. And, he'll never tell me what to do. He knows better, but he'll listen and talk to me and brainstorm of, what makes you happy? What frustrates you? What are things that you're excited about? And so he really got me thinking and doing some, I guess, deep dive into what is it exactly that's missing and that I need to be doing instead. And that's kind of how, it came to, I just need to do my own thing, really, because otherwise, I may find the perfect spot in 2 years, but what if I don't? And then if I don't, I'm going to just go to another place. I decided I'd just create something that operates the way I want it to operate, that, that goes by my mission, by my values, and, hopefully others tag along.
So take me back to the early days. What was it like? Did you have cases when you started? What was it like? Was it just you? Did you have some help?
I had no help, but I did have 4 cases that my prior law firm was trying to actively get rid of and did not want. So I was
so there's
I'll
there's
take
a word
it.
for that. It's dogs with fleas, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And so I was willing to take the fleas and take the dirt and take it all. And so I took those 4 cases. I had very, very limited funds. I didn't have, I think I already mentioned, didn't have any staff. So it was just me, purely solo, just going out there and just really just hustling and trying to generate business.
So let's talk about that. So what sorts of things did you do? It's scary to start a firm with no clients. And then you're like, what do I do? I can go, and you've got all these companies saying, we'll give you we'll sell you leads, you can pay us all this money, a lot of this. What did you do to try to go get cases?
So in one regard, I was fortunate that one of the law firms that I started, I started from scratch. It was funded by the owner, but I had some understanding as to what things would generate business. And one was, of course, developing referral relationships. So when you don't have to actually pay up front, but you pay a referral fee, or it can even be just referral relationships with other professionals that were not even allowed to pay referral fees to. I was very interested in my last firm in generating, I started seeing a switch to the, I guess I'd say the audience's attention going more to their phones and their screens, more like, I'd say, phones, tablets, and things like that, than billboards and TV and stuff. And then I started seeing, well before I ever saw an actual ad from Facebook. I'm not sure that they were around at that time, but I started seeing how you could be in front of an audience that way for nothing, for zero. And so that is something that I wanted to implement on my previous firm. And one of the things, I guess, where the alignment wasn't there as to, what risks existed or what benefit even was there. But I wanted to explore it. That was very exciting to me. So it ended up being something that I could do with my firm, because nobody was going to tell me I wasn't going to do it. So I tried it. And fortunately, we've grown following on social media that allows us to speak directly to the community and generate cases that way as well.
So what's your social media platforms of choice? I've seen you on LinkedIn. What else do you do?
So we're pretty much everywhere except for Twitter and X, but our Instagram presence it's pretty decent. We just hit 50,000 followers, and we do Facebook, we do TikTok, and just every platform we treat like the presence that we have there is unique. We try not to repurpose content and just share the exact same thing everywhere, but talk to the audience that's there in the tone that that's appropriate and the purpose that the platform has.
So I imagine you didn't do all at once. You probably started one and started stacking and moving to the next. Is that...
You mean as far as the social media platforms?
Yes.
Well, so I don't think TikTok really was a thing before the pandemic. Maybe it was, and I just wasn't aware. But yes, that's pretty accurate. I think we initially were doing more Facebook than anything. In fact, when they came up with their live feature, I was just beside myself. I'm like, this is so cool. This is, I mean, so amazing. Like, who doesn't want to see something live? And like, that's, that's raw, and that, I was just so excited about it. And we did a lot of Facebook, and then Instagram started picking up speed. We now do, as you mentioned earlier, LinkedIn is something that initially, I guess, people consider as some sort of, just your colleagues or whatnot. But I mean, we do quite a bit of LinkedIn.
So obviously, the stuff you did started to bring cases in, and you've grown a lot. But I came across a post that you did recently about hiring your first employee, and how you thought your life would be easier, but that's not how it turned out. So why don't you explain that? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, and actually, this reminds me.
It's similar, and I'll say before you start, not unusual experience. I've had a similar experience, but I'm curious your experience on it.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your experience. Mine was this. So when I started without staff, quickly enough, because I had learned that, or I guess my philosophy was, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I don't want to just, lean on referrals and let that be it. What if everyone goes away and then I have nothing? So I diversified pretty early on, but then that brought more business than I was expecting. So I hired my actual first, I wouldn't call employee because she was a contractor, but I got a college student, and I trained her to do very basic legal assistant work, but that was incredibly helpful for me, opening claims, sending letters, going to the post office. And little by little, I started needing more of that. Then, I hired a part-time paralegal, then she became full-time, and, the rest is history. But the problems that with I guess the human factor of things is that I initially thought, this is amazing. I now I can afford this. Like, I can actually pay someone and they'll help me. But I didn't consider that, to me, there was this, before kids, it was just me and my husband. There was nothing but the law firm. Like, I literally had nothing else to focus on. It didn't matter, like, if I was sick or if I was tired, nothing. It was like, go, go, go. And, no time off, no sickness. But when you have when you put a human into the equation, of course, that's not true. Like, people have families, they need time off, they need a doctor's appointment, their car breaks down, they don't get along, with the paralegals don't get along, you have to mediate their conflicts because you don't have an HR person at that point. So the human aspect definitely made things more real and interesting, but it wasn't easier to have someone. It took some load and it added different load.
It's so true. And I'm curious, you're 100% right. It's the people, and every time you add a new person, it gets a little more complicated. Mm-hmm. And so, myself included, many lawyers weren't trained about how to manage people. They weren't trained on how to sort of solve those sort of issues. So how did you figure it out as your firm was growing and you kept adding people to the mix? How did you learn, and how did you figure it out? Did you have resources you went to, or you just sort of figured it out as you went along?
The people problems?
Yeah, and just managing the team.
I don't think I have it figured out, but one thing that, I have learned through, for the past 7 or 8 years is that there is definitely a big component about if you find a way to define what your culture is, that'll make it easier for you to figure out whoever you bring on board is a team member that, aligns with that is worth investing in and working with, or is someone that just needs to get off the bus and go elsewhere. If you have your company culture well defined, that just helps you. It makes it easier. It's not perfect, of course. And you have people that have great resumes and great, qualifications and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, my My personal belief is until you work with someone, you won't know, no matter the references you get, no matter the results they come with, like, oh, I got these big hits and cases and like multi-million-dollar verdicts, but you work with them and then you really find out, do we also align on providing compassionate representation? Do we align on calling clients frequently to give updates? I mean, just basic things that, again, I haven't solved the problem, but I have learned that certain things make it a little easier. And now at this point, at least, I'd say very few things surprise me. So I don't know, you develop a shell.
Okay, so, certainly culture is important and values. So do you have any tips? What's your approach on the front end trying to filter to get the right people to come in? And then if the wrong person gets through, or you find out later that they're not really the right fit, maybe some tips on how to solve that issue or sort of get them out the door.
Yeah, I think it depends on the role. It's ideal to me if you can find, like, for example, for a legal assistant role, that you can maybe start with some contract work, or like you start with an intern. If you grab someone when they're an intern, then they usually don't have bad habits, and you can kind of help them grow and help them acquire, basically feed off of your talent and your experience and all of that good stuff. Same with attorneys. I mean, if you get them at that stage, but again, I think that without having worked with someone, I don't see how else you solve for the surprises. I read this book recently. I forget the name. It's like totally escaping me, but it says something similar, like, that you should try to come up with a project and give this person a project so they work on it. But I think like what I mean more is like side by side, right? Like the day to day, like they're seeing different aspects of their work. And I found no perfect formula. Like the people that I've worked with, until I work with them is when I really know. But knowing from the get go, like these are the things that are important for us, it's 100% like makes things like way easier.
So another thing that as your firm grows, your role as the owner and the founder is going to change. In the beginning, you did everything. You got the staples, you tried the cases, you did everything. So how has your role changed over the years? What do you do now? What's the main, what's a typical week like for you nowadays?
Well, there's no typical week, but my role is 100% different than what it was at the beginning. I've been told that, that there's going to come a day when I want to know nothing to do with a case or a client, that I just want to be like at the very like highest level of the company. And I don't know that's necessarily going to happen to me because of my story that I just told you at the beginning of how, my yearning was to be a lawyer. I still have that in me. I still, keep a docket of cases and handle the biggest cases that the law firm has. But at the same time, I am the person that is letting the world know what we're doing. And that's the most important part of my role. Like we, internally, of course, like making sure that the culture stays true to the way we want it to be and making sure that everyone's feeling heard and taken care of. But outside, like letting everyone know of the results of what we can do for people or how we can help other lawyers, who don't handle this type of case or this type of, or cases in Texas. And so that takes shape in many ways, like, being in podcasts or networking events, speaking opportunities, things like that. So that's a lot of what that looks like. And of course, we do a lot of like philanthropic work in the community. We have from the beginning, and that continues to be part of my role. That's something I really believe in. And so I've been told that, oh, no, you just hand that off. But I don't really want to. And so I haven't.
Well, that's the good thing about being the owner and the founder. You get to do the things you like to do, right?
That's right.
So you mentioned you do speaking. I'm curious about that. So as your profile has increased, probably the speaking opportunities have increased as well. And I've seen just from some of your stuff, you're all around the country speaking. Maybe tell me about your experience there. Is that something you've consciously tried to do, or has it just sort of happened organically?
I think there's a little bit of both. I've sought it out in the sense that I I came across this opportunity to participate in a project to write a book. And the book is called Law Moms. And it had a lot of attention because of, touching on, on a subject that, so many, I mean, now I think the statistics are like 50% of lawyers are women, and many of those are moms. And so we go through challenges that sometimes go unnoticed or unheard. And with that came speaking opportunities, being on panels and writing articles and what have you. And so I saw that in the sense that I kind of knew that could happen with participating in the book and investing in that commitment, time, energy, money, all that. But at the same time, I think with, taking a step back from the day to day as it used to look like, I'm still very much day to day with the law firm, but taking a step back to do a little more of the, of the presence in the community and the public speaking, then that it's kind of, it snowballs, kind of is how I would describe it. And then, of course, the law firm grows, there's more success, there's the word gets out. Now it's just not just in Austin, not just in Texas, and someone hears about you in California or what have you. And so that's kind of how I think that happened.
Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Life Cycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Life Cycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. So you've grown your firm really nicely. 5 attorneys from just you. From the outside, it looks great. It's incredible. But anybody who's gone through it knows it's not a straight line up. You got ups and downs and steps forward and steps back. And I know that, so you had your first baby during COVID, and then maybe an attorney quit at the same time. Maybe talk me through some of the ups and downs and, what sorts of lessons you've learned and maybe advice you could give to others out there as they're trying to build their firms.
1000%. You hit the nail on the head. It is not a straight line up. I've never met a business owner who will say that no matter what their growth is. Ups and downs abound. And one thing I've learned is, and especially because I have a couple of my really close friends who started their business a couple of years after I started mine. So being a little bit ahead, I can tell them like what's to come, just like my friends would tell me, what to expect. I would say it never ends, right? Like it never ends. Just as soon as you think you've put out that one horrible fire, another one is about to grab your attention and get you out of the room running. But you know what? The alternative is something that I know a lot of business owners with failed businesses, especially law firms, who have had to go back. They try to open up shop and they couldn't get clients, or, the finances didn't work out. And I've interviewed them. They're looking for a role. And, I just don't have it in me to ever do that again. And so I always remind myself and people who are starting on this journey that it just will not end. So just be okay with that. You're better for it. Every single challenge that you face is like, next time it happens, you're just like, oh yeah, that person quit. Okay, next, or, oh, the client's upset. Like they're saying they're going to file a complaint. Okay, so how do we tackle this? So it makes you stronger and makes you more confident. And I think, the secret is you have to give, like, don't keep the knowledge and the experience. Like you have to give it back to those that are going to go through it after you did.
And so you've talked about the ups and downs and the growth of your firm and how it's sort of changed you. I'm curious your perspective, because I personally believe as well, if your business or your firm, if you want that to grow, you are going to have to grow as a person. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on what comes first. If, do you have to grow as a person first and then that allows you to grow your firm, or does the growth of the firm change you? Or again, maybe it's a little both. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It might be a little both. It might be a chicken egg problem. I really don't know. I think I've definitely grown with the law firm because of the law firm. And many times I wish I'd grown first and then started the law firm. But you know what? Things happened the way they did. And I mean, I'm still growing. And in big part because of the law firm,
So at some point, so your husband works with you now. He's not a lawyer, but at some point he came on. He was not there I mean, obviously he was helping you and supporting you, but he was not actually employed by the firm in the beginning, but he's there now. Is that right?
That's exactly right. He's CFO, COO/husband.
So talk me through that decision-making process.
He's always been very excited about the law firm, and to him it was initially like just a hobby he was excited to help me with. Eventually, as the law firm got more successful and the things that were needed that he could do kept growing and growing, and his own dissatisfaction with his current, at the time, his job started growing, and there was misalignment there. It started to become kind of obvious that he just needed to be here. And so thankfully he was just as excited as I was to make it happen, and we were able to, and now here we are.
So I know a number of husband and wife teams that work together in law firms and works
Do
really
you know
well for
the
them.
husband and wife team?
I have met the husband. I know who they are. But yes, so that's a good example. That and I know some others. I imagine there's some pros and cons. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know that I would call them cons, to be honest. I mean, and I'm not saying this because John will hear this podcast, but it's just, it's just challenging, of course. But I mean, I would not have it any other way. Nobody else is going to be as invested as I am in this, or like literally give it their entire blood, sweat, and tears. There's challenges. I mean, there's nights that I'm like, I am completely exhausted. I do not want to review financials right now. Like, this is the worst time. But like, we have no other time to do it, and so super difficult at times, but so rewarding. I mean, when we have a win, it's like, it feels like you're unstoppable. And we'd love to have even more people, up with us. And hopefully as we keep growing, we keep adding to the circle.
Well, I'll tell you, the trust level, can't beat that. I mean, that is unbeatable there. So another question, as you continue to grow and get more success, people start to ask more of you. They want more of your time. They want more of just you. And how do you deal with that? Because you've mentioned some of the things you do. You're speaking. You got to manage employees. You're still handling casework, all the stuff. How do you got kids? How do you handle and manage your time?
In 2025, not great, particularly because I had opportunities that I never thought would come to me, and I just felt like I couldn't say no. And also because just, I guess I sort of identify myself as a people person. So it's very hard for me to say no, especially when someone wants help or, it's asking something of me. But that there was a level of, I wouldn't call it burnout, but a level of exhaustion that I hadn't experienced before towards the end of the year. And then looking back and kind of reflecting, it was very clear that I just said yes too many times. There were some unnecessary splits of my time that they should have been no. So I needed to be more protective, because at the end of the day, who takes who gets mom, who's given it all, and wife is like my family. So they're the ones that experience, the end of the day and like the weekends and stuff the working weekends were completely unreasonable last year. So how do you do it? I mean, how I do it is I try to go by gut feeling and like what things are productive for the law firm, productive for me personally, for my family. But it's not always, there's no right or wrong answer. I just could tell you that in my assessment of the year, I can say now, okay, 2025 maybe went a little too hard, maybe should have said a little more no's. And so you just adjust. I mean, there's nothing else. I can go back. We had a wildly successful year, and I'm very grateful that we had the opportunity we did, but definitely learned the lesson that need to be a little more protective of my time.
I came across this saying, I don't know who said it, I'd give him credit, but the yes and no thing. So it's when you say no to one thing. When you say yes, you say no to a lot of things. And I've experienced that. And last year I had a similar thing. I had to middle of the year, I just had to start chopping things off my plate. I got sort of ruthless, and I said, no, 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 no. And it felt like it opened up a little bit of space so then I could get my head about me again. And of course, I've started saying yes again. So I gotta be careful. So,
I know it.
yeah, it's tough. So let me ask you, do you try cases? Do you still try cases, or is
I
that
still try
something you stepped
cases.
away? Oh, wow. So how many are you averaging now per year? I know every
Well,
year's
we
different,
actually
but-
just had one trial last year. We're trying to have at least 3 trials this year. We'll see. At the end of the day, it's always a client's case. And if it's not the best for the client, if you're getting all the money that is on the table is what exists, I'm not going to be, a lawyer who's going to say, like, let's just teach them a lesson and I'm going to recommend what's best for them. And many times that ends up being settling, especially as the more success you get, the easier it gets to get what you're asking for without trying the case. But yeah, we had a good win last year and hoping for more this year. We'll see.
So do you specialize? I know you do personal injury, but there's some personal injuries that, only do trucking or maybe really focus on dog bites or whatever. Do you have a certain focus or you'll do whatever?
We don't have a focus, but there are certain torts, so to speak, that we don't do. We don't do medical malpractice. We do a little bit of sexual assault and child abuse, and we don't do class action, don't do product defect, but anything else, your run-of-the-mill personal injury case, we will handle. We love trucking cases. Also, are trying to focus a little bit of a higher percentage of our marketing in trucking and see where that leads, because that's definitely a passion.
So I'm going to sort of switch gears a little bit, but as I was getting ready, I saw that, did you learn English as an adult?
I did.
So tell me about that. That's got to be, how old were you and how hard was that?
So I was 18. I grew up in Mexico, so I had a basic understanding of English. It's not that remote. It's right next to the U.S., so some. But I moved here as an exchange student when I had already graduated high school in Mexico. And initially, I had applied to go to law school in Mexico, got accepted. I'm just going to do this 1 year. But then once I was here, it was very difficult to go back. There's just so much corruption. There weren't any jury trials for civil cases back then, which is something that, was always appealing. And in my mind, it was always what I wanted to do. So I just found a path to stay here, and thankfully I am. And now I'm a U.S. citizen.
Nice. So, I imagine being an immigrant, coming to a country that's not yours, where you grew up, it's got to be tough. Not speaking the language, it's got to be tough. What sort of challenges, what was the challenge like for you making the switch over here?
There were many challenges. Probably, I did the year with my sister, but our family, we were away from our parents and all that. And we weren't in the most immigrant-friendly part of the state. We were exchange students in Texas, and that was tough. I guess having some unpleasant encounters. But for the most part, I would say that the toughest thing was that everything was so close yet so far. For example, I was already in the U.S., but was I going to be able to get into a college? Was I going to be able to pay for it or find scholarships or find a way? So just, I think looking back, like trying to make it happen was pretty challenging.
I imagine that was really good training for building a law firm. Overcoming those challenges probably seem a lot bigger than the challenges you growing a firm. But so I imagine that was good training for that.
I would think so. Yeah, probably right.
So I came across, switching gears again, I came across another post of yours that you said you plan years ahead. So I want to know, what's your process for that? Do you have a process?
The process usually is that John, my husband is CFO, COO. He is almost 100% in charge of coming up with a plan for the upcoming year. But in that, when we're starting to plan for the upcoming year, we're starting to also look at, in the next 5 years, like because this year is just a piece of the future. So how else are we gonna make everything else happen? And what do we, where do we want to be? Like, do we still want to be there? Sometimes you have to revise your dreams. So that's kind of how it goes. Just like late night conversations and reviewing, where we are now, where have we gotten, and where can we get to?
So you've got what you're trying to do this year. You've got 5 years. What's the really long-term vision? Do you know what you want that to be for the firm and for your life?
Well, I don't know that that's going to remain the same, because hopefully we will live to have, grandkids and great grandkids. So that may be, that may be completely different from now. But we really want to have a stable operation. We want to be in different states. Right now, we're only in Texas. There are very unfavorable laws as it pertains to medical malpractice, and there are pretty egregious attempts to erode, the victims' rights and things like that we think might be more favorable in other states. And then for our family, we want to make sure that as any parent, that they have access to things that we didn't have, and that we're able to, my family's still in Mexico. My parents are getting older. We want to make sure that we have the ability to visit, and my husband's family as well is up north. So, and want to make sure that we are in a place where we can support their dreams, whatever that looks like, because they're pretty young right now. One says she wants to be a baker. She's 5. I don't know if that's going to be the thing, but if that's a thing, cool. So hopefully we can help her get there.
That's a great answer. So another thing, as I was preparing in my notes, you have an interesting approach. I like it. Approach to life and your firm. I'll call it the 3 Ps. I don't know what you call it, but why don't you explain that?
Right. It wasn't intentional, believe it or not, but passion, perseverance, and preparation. And actually, sometimes I use persistence, because I think they go hand in hand. But yeah, I think it's applicable to anything, to find, especially professional success. I think you find your passion, you get there with discipline, daily good habits, and are persistent, persevere through adversity, and you show up prepared, right? When people say, I'm sure, you've interviewed a lot of other founders and owners, and sometimes people who aren't in this position will say like, oh, how lucky are you for this, that, or the other? If you're unprepared and an amazing opportunity gets there, you're not going to get it. So for you to get the opportunity, it takes preparation. For example, just the speaking engagements. I could have wanted and desired to be on a national stage my whole life. But if I don't have a topic to talk about, I don't have slides, I don't have a public presence, it's just not going to happen, or don't have connections. So the 3 Ps, I think, are pretty something I believe in.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a philosophy, and I do think the persistence and the consistency is key. No one, like you said, they look at you from the outset and say, oh, you're so lucky. If they saw what it really took, they would probably have a different attitude about it, I would think. So let me ask this question. So for other founders out there, maybe aspiring founders of law firms, is there any advice that you would give them as they are early in their journey, maybe wanting to grow a nice firm for themselves?
I would say it never hurts, no matter where you are in your journey, to do some reflection, to figure out what you're passionate about, what makes you happy. Because at the end of the day, if you're, it can be very lucrative to be a law firm owner or to be a lawyer. But if you're not in it because it's your passion, you're going to burn out, you're going to hate your life, you're going to, maybe have some substance abuse problems, which are so common in our profession. If you find out that, hey, I love research, I love appeals, all that stuff, whatever it is, just find out what your passion is and take it from there. I think being intentional about discovering what that is. And it may not be the law. I have friends that I went to law school with that are doing things that are completely different, and they're clearly their passion, and that's incredible. So I think being honest about that is pretty important.
So I usually like to ask people what they do in their spare time. What do they do for fun? I know you've got young kids, so that's probably what you do. But what sorts of things do you like to do outside the law?
There aren't that many things that I can do outside of the law, but one thing I think I love the part of my job that requires me to create content. I love creating, and like that's something that as a lawyer I love coming up with an argument or emotion, but as the part of the lawyer acquisition or the law firm acquisition part of my job, client acquisition, I love creating content. So sometimes, if the kids are napping or whatnot, I still have a heavy hand in doing that. So I guess that's kind of a hobby that is also part of my job.
So, well, let's talk about it, because you do have some really good content. The stuff I've seen is really good. How did you learn that? Do you have a team? Have you outsourced some of that? For other people out there that thinks I can't do it all. I've got to run my business and all these things. How do you come up with the plan and the strategy and put the team together to make it all happen?
I have done it all myself from the beginning, and I still do. But now I have, as we've grown, I have a team that supports the different things that we do. So, for example, the videos that we put out for Instagram, we have a content creating agency that, has the fancy equipment and all that stuff. But you don't need that. I talked about, doing the live videos. We have phones, we have cameras. So I think it just has to be something that, nowadays it's pretty hard to say that, that you don't need. Everyone should do it. You need it to have a presence out there, but you don't need, a team of people. For example, for LinkedIn, I get some help from another agency, but again, it's my stories. It's stuff that I craft. I need some help in publishing, at the volume that we do now, but all of that stuff you can do yourself, maybe not at the same, at the same rate or at the same pace, or with fancy video, but at the same time, it's not necessary.
I think that's great advice. I think you just got to start doing it. You just got to push it out there. It's never going to be perfect. I know lawyers are all scared about not looking perfect or being perfect or saying something that's not perfect. You just got to get out there, and sometimes perfect is not really the way you want it to come out. You want it to be nice, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
That's exactly right. People right now, the data shows that people don't want perfect. They want real, they want approachable lawyers. And that's why those lawyers who are on social media are getting the cases, because people feel like they know them, they know their stories, they feel like they're friends. So when you're not doing that, you're expecting perfection or not even being out there. You're just missing out.
Well, Laura, this has been great. Thank you for coming on. I've enjoyed sort of following you on social media, and I'll continue to do so. Hopefully, we'll get to meet in person at a conference, maybe where you're speaking here at some point. I don't know if you've got those lined up for 2026 or not, but hopefully we get to meet in person. But for anybody out there that wants to find you, get in touch with you, maybe refer you a case, whatever, what's the best way to find you?
Thank you so much. I love that. Best way to find me is just type up Laura Ramos James and you'll find me in different platforms. People sometimes don't believe it, but I respond to the Instagram messages. So you're talking to me. LinkedIn, send me a connection request. I'd love to stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks again for coming on. It's been really nice, and I like what you're doing over there. Keep building. Well, I'll look for you moving into Georgia here soon.
Thank you so much. Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.